Welcome to United Jews channel.
So guys, let's finish up with the last question. We only have 10 minutes. What is this
We haven't
war
heard from
is
everybody
really
yet.
about?
I'm sorry, what is Tatiana?
We
What
haven't
is-
heard about we haven't heard from other people.
Oh
what they
yeah,
think
yeah,
about
please.
propaganda.
Krista, if you want to add something. Krista, you haven't been to Russia or Ukraine, have you?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I guess what I would say is I feel like there's a lot of US propaganda that is pro escalation and that we don't really understand the background. Like what I was saying about Yanukovych, was not a Russian puppet, and that I think that we don't understand. We're under the influence of propaganda, not understanding that a big part of this war was, strategic US weapons being near the border, even biolabs paid by the Pentagon, and that, that Crimea should have gotten a vote to do what they wanted. And also, the Donbass probably should have had a vote because, there was an illegal overthrow. And I feel like that's critical in order to understand the situation. And I really disagree with you guys. I don't, as much as it would be great to have Russians completely leave, all of the Donbass and Crimea, I don't see it happening. And what I see happening is that escalation is going to cause destabilization. It's going to affect people in the global south. It's going to cause, this lack of being willing to kind of find a middle ground, is going to create much more pain than we could possibly really even imagine right now. Just for these two regions, it's 15% of the landmass of Ukraine, and I think it would be much better to just go to the table and normalize relations and say, okay, well,
Let me ask you a question, Krista. Let me ask you a question. I hate to interrupt, but I really do want to ask this. I'm assuming you're from California then.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if, for example, Mexico were to say, we want California back, and we'll take the southern half of California and you can keep the rest. We'll keep everything from Los Angeles south. And so we won't go to war and everything will be okay, but we'll just take this half. Would that be acceptable to you?
I don't think that's a fair analogy at all. I mean,
I think it's absolutely a fair analogy.
No, it's
if
not.
They were to say, if they were to invade and they were to take
Crimea was a part of Russia for 200 years. It was given as a gift in the context of it all being a part of the USSR.
It wasn't a gift.
It was.
Law. It wasn't a gift.
It was taken by force.
In 1954, it was assigned to the region of Ukraine as a political gesture. In 1954.
It was assigned by whom?
It was signed by Khrushchev. It was actually at that time, even though everybody's saying as a gesture, but it was signed as a law. And ever since, it was part of Ukraine. And in 1991, it was agreed and signed as a part of Ukraine twice.
To keep it, Ukraine, to keep it. Keep it. That's the major thing. Keep it. So nothing changed. It's just the same thing continued.
So that's why I wanted to little bit, like, because we're talking propaganda, and every word you just said is actually part of the propaganda.
Yeah, well, I don't agree because
do you think that district court in Hague is also affected by propaganda and spreading propaganda?
Are you talking to me? Sorry.
Yes, I'm talking to you, Krista. My question is, so you said that every word that we say is propaganda. What about verdict of District Court of Hague on MH17 that was issued in November 2022? Is that, in your opinion, propaganda? Does Hague spreading propaganda?
I don't know what you mean by Hague.
Hague,
I mean,
the Hague.
Hague. I have bad spelling. Sorry.
No.
Hague,
It's the different pronunciation in different regions.
Are you saying that Putin being charged for war crimes?
No, that's not about war crimes. That's about the Malaysia Airlines Boeing that was shot down in Ukraine in 2014, where 300 people died, and the court has investigated everything about it and issued a verdict 8 years later, just last year, and that included the discovery of facts that, in fact, these 8 years, Russia was de facto occupying those territories and controlling the separatists' forces and supplying heavy machinery weapons. So, in fact, it was all lie by Russia. Do you think that the court is spreading propaganda too, or do you have a different opinion about this?
I actually have no familiarity with that topic at all. I mean, my punchline is, is global war worth these small regions?
Yeah,
and
sure,
to me, it's not.
I would really encourage you to read that verdict, because it contradicts with many of the points that you mentioned.
Hey, Krista, you bring up another point. You just said something that really speaks to the heart of what you're talking about, what we're talking about. Benjamin Franklin said once that those who would give up security, give up a little security a little freedom for a little security, will have neither and deserves neither. How much of your freedom are you willing to give up to avoid conflict? How much of your property are you willing to give up to placate your neighbors? And you can put it in very personal terms. Do you own a home, for example? Do you own your home?
Well, I don't really need to go into an analogy. I think, in this case, Crimea, these regions, they were asking for a legal vote after an illegal overthrow of the government.
They weren't asking. They were under occupation, and Russia was controlling what they say in public. It was not people's.
Usually in referendum, you have at least three questions. That referendum had only one question, and the people were answering that question under the gun, pretty much, because they knew if they would not answer that correctly, something will happen either to them or to the member of their family.
This is very KGB type of thing to do, right?
I don't know. What I know is that I'm not willing to give up my safety in the U.S. over some small regions in Ukraine. I'm just not.
Well, how human that is for you, Krista.
That's Krista. That's very true, and this is what Putin is counting on. This is what what Putin and the Xi of the world are counting on, that you're not willing to sacrifice your comfort for the principle upon which you stand. It's all very good if your freedom is not at risk. You're not willing to sacrifice any of your comfort.
Well, they can sacrifice 15% of the Ukraine and it'll be over.
It will not.
Which 15% do you
will never be over?
It will never be over.
If you give to an international terrorist who is blackmailing the world with nuclear weapons, if you give him anything, he will demand more and more until he gets everything he can get.
The reason why they tried to overthrow their government is because Minsk II was not going through, and Crimea was going to be taken back. They didn't randomly attack it for no reason.
No. Putin did it in order to gain more territory so that he can sell it as a victory in Russia and prolong his term.
Dmitry, it was because there was a civil war going on.
No, there was
no. It was manufactured by Russia in order to keep Putin longer on the throne.
It wasn't. Okay, I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding.
The only reason he needed the Crimea, because a few years before they found the
resources.
They found the oil. That's the only reason why he wanted Crimea, because they found an oil there.
Also, he needed a warm weather port other than his own.
That's the point.
But
Yeah, that's
but here's the deal. Here's the problem. It's always someone else that must sacrifice for your freedom and your comfort. And this is the fundamental issue. My brother put it very, very profoundly to me the other day. He says, "Fred, I'm glad you got sick. I was supposed to have died. In all honesty, for the first 3 months of the hospital, I was supposed to have died, and my family was told to come and say goodbye to me. I didn't. Okay." But he said, "I'm glad you're paralyzed now, because if you were not, you would be in Ukraine fighting for their freedom. Because freedom for me is very important, not just for myself, but for everybody else." When I went to Ukraine, I remember my girlfriend's little sister coming home one day, and she was crying because she couldn't get a book. She couldn't find a book in English, written in English, that she could take and study and do a report on. And I was like, one of the things I want to do when I get to the point where I can retire and stuff, I want to set up a library in Nizhny Gorsk of English books, just leftover English books, English books from the United States brought over there, so that they could have, so all the kids could have English speaking, English books written in English to study with. Their freedom is as important to me as my own.
You know what? To me, it's like this blown up, with all due respect, like patriotic, high worded, there's a reality that if we escalate this war, I think we're going to be completely messed up. Our whole planet is going to be destabilized. The US came into the region with weapons, with economy. It came in. Our officials were on the ground being photographed. These regions wanted to cede. This is not a war because Putin wanted wanted to take over the Ukraine. It was because these regions were not given their independence. It was because Crimea was going to be taken back and it wasn't given a right to vote. And you know what? It's just not worth it. It's just not worth it. It doesn't mean that Ukraine's not going to be free. Look, 85% of Ukraine can go join the EU. Are we really willing to?
And which 15% are you willing? My fiance's family is in Kharkiv. Should we give up Kharkiv? I know the people in Kharkiv don't want it. You know what you do?
You sit down at the table with the two countries and you talk about it.
You're saying you want to give up 15%. Okay, 15% and part of that region is in Kharkiv and the outskirts of Kharkiv. Should we give my fiance's family's home to Russia? They don't want to be part of Russia.
What about
they
those
lived
kids
under Russia
that were
before.
Kidnapped and their parents were killed, and now they have no heritage whatsoever? Should we give up that part of Ukraine and do whatever the Putin wants?
What are we going to give up? The whole planet? Are we going to give up the whole planet? Because that's what we're talking about.
No, we're not. We're not talking about the whole planet. How are we talking about the whole planet?
Oh yeah, we are. This is going to ricochet and destabilize our world in a way that we can't even imagine.
Did World War II end the world?
World War III? Look, China and Iran are behind Russia. They're not leaving those areas. They're not going to go away. You can give Ukraine more weapons, but it's not going to work.
So how much of the rest of the Middle East should we give Iran? Should we let, because Israel is a very small area. Should we give up Israel and let the Jews, just die there and not participate in the world because it's convenient for us to give up Israel? The Jews are surrounded by the Arabs.
If you think that World War III is a great idea, then go for it. We'll burn.
I don't think World War III is a great idea at all. But what you're saying either or, and it's not
that's
either
what you're
or.
saying.
No, what you're saying is that we have a choice of either the whole world goes to war or we give up this, and that's not the choice. Those are not the only choices we have. The false idea that we have only this choice or that choice is false.
Well, Krista, that's what it seems. For last 30 plus years, I would say more than 30 years, United States were spending billions and billions of dollars preparing for the war with Russia. or former Soviet Union. Remember that? I remember the clip when I first came here and I watched the Bill Gates clip when he was talking about it. How he grew up and he was scared about nuclear weapon coming from Russia. Okay. So you're telling me right now that we are, as the United States, spending billions and billions of dollars of taxpayer money, should be scared of nuclear weapons of the country that don't even know if their button working, because they were stealing, and corruption in the Russia is way worse than it's in Ukraine. And I don't think that nuclear was ever supported properly for him to press the button, because if he could press the button, it's been all over a year. He would press it by now. So that propaganda that tells the people that we should be scared about Putin and we should give him anything he wants just to shut him down, it is a propaganda.
It's a propaganda. Are you serious? China and Iran are behind him. You think he couldn't launch a nuclear weapon? They can fight us.
Who give Iran the option to have a nuclear? Do you know?
What's that?
Do you remember who gave Iran an option to have a nuclear? To work on a nuclear?
Who gave them the ability to nuclearize or to weaponize the nuclear facilities there?
Do you remember?
No, I don't.
It was Obama. It was Obama. And now we have Biden behind all of that. Do you think it's Biden, who don't even know his wife's name? It's Obama behind that as well. It's Obama who said Clinton with the button to restart the whole thing. So if anyone we should worry about our own government to put us in this position. We should not be worried about Putin to create the third world war. Sorry.
Well, I don't see. I'm worried about it.
Let me ask you this, Krista. Do you honestly believe that a third world war, if it were to happen, if on the long shot possibility it were to happen, would be the end of the world?
I don't think it matters whether or not it's the end of the world. What matters is the stability, like our ability to travel, our ability to,
that's already gone.
No, it's not. I was
gone.
just in Thailand. It's not gone. We need to have, a normal as possible. And I just don't see it. I mean, they can attack us a lot of ways. If we have China, Iran, and Russia together trying to attack the US, they can implode us. They don't need to hit us with nuclear weapons.
You're right. You're absolutely right. They can do it from here.
So it's not worth it. That's what I'm saying.
What does this have to do with anything with them taking over the United States or imploding the United States, to put it in your words? Anyway. This is just Ukraine is just a chess piece to Putin.
Well, I think Ukraine is also a chess piece to the United States, frankly.
Well, I think it's their home to the Ukrainians. And I don't feel comfortable.
Why did we pull Ukraine out of peace talks? Why did we pull Ukraine out of peace talks last March, according to the Israeli prime minister, when both sides had made major compromises?
What are you talking about?
The Israeli Prime Minister Bennett said that they had 14 drafts of peace agreements between Russia and Ukraine and the UK and the EU. I mean, mostly it was Britain and the US that told them to leave negotiations so that they could smash Putin. That's what they said, smash Putin.
Do you honestly think that Zelenskyy would give up any of Ukraine?
Well, I don't know what exactly the negotiations were, but I think Russia had said that they would not try to do the regime change, and Zelenskyy had said that they wouldn't join NATO, and that was like a basis for the beginning of the negotiations.
They talked about it years before. Okay, for Putin, this was just an excuse, but just so you understand that if United States and just Israel, just two countries, would really want to get Putin, do you think they would need someone else to get it done?
Get Putin, like assassinate Putin or what?
Anything.
If they wanted to attack Russia, do you think Ukraine would be the way to do it?
Well, that is kind of, I mean, they're weakening Russia through the Russian military going in Ukraine.
The Americans didn't force Russia to go into Ukraine. The Americans responded to the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. Russia invaded Ukraine.
Oh, I know.
The Americans
they
responded
invaded...
to that. They didn't.
Fred,
they didn't force Russia to do it.
Fred,
but their policy to weaken Russia has been going for like 10 years. I mean, they've had that in the national as their policy towards Russia is to weaken it.
I'm not sure, guys, if you've heard about the fact that we as the US were telling Ukraine ever since September of 2021 that Russia is planning to invade. We took our military from the Black Sea. We removed our embassy from Ukraine. This never, ever in the history of the United States, this never happened before. That
we
tells
facilitated the invasion of Ukraine by Russia.
I'm sorry?
We facilitated
exactly
the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. That's
exactly my point. So when you are saying giving something, that's why Biden, when he met with the one of the Tanya, remind me the last name of the Ukrainian minister that came to see Biden 2 days before the war.
I don't remember.
I forgot his last name. So in his interview, he actually clearly stated when he was invited, because usually, you know, only presidents invited at the president's level, right? And the vice president meets at the vice president level. But he was invited to the Biden's office, to the Oval Room. And he was told by Biden himself, you need to save yourself, you need to save your family. And
we will give you sanctuary.
And we will give you, the Russia has 72 hours. We will stand with you, but only for 72 hours. From September 2021, they knew that Russia would invade, and we did not do anything to prevent that. Because Zelenskyy was asking, why don't you do sanctions now? Why you need to wait until they get in? And the Biden was talking, if it's going to be a small invasion, then we're not going to do anything. But if it's going to be a big invasion, then we'll respond. Did we respond? We didn't. It's been over a year. So many people have died, and we still did not respond. The land lease that's been signed, we don't even need to spend our money because this is something that we already have. We're not in the war with no one anymore, thank God. And we have all the military frozen in Arizona and Georgia, all around the countries. If we only will give maybe 5% of what we have, this war would be over by now.
What do you how do you think this war will be over? China is going to send weapons to Russia. It's not going to end.
They will not send the weapons to Russia. That's very clear.
That's already been debunked. That's already been put out of mind. What you don't realize is we've already given Russia, and they then took more.
Mm-hmm.
We gave them Crimea.
Yes.
We gave it to them.
The whole
and they came back and they said, okay, now we want Donbass.
No.
And so we say, so now if we give them Donbass, they're going to say, okay, now we want central Ukraine.
Don't not understand that they were ostracized from the international community for Crimea after they couldn't give Crimea a vote.
And it wasn't until they invaded Ukraine, the rest of Ukraine, that they were ostracized and actually excluded.
They were ostracized since 2014. You can look at all, but
but they were still trading, and I could still go, and I still did go to visit. During that time.
Let it be the reason that what gave rise to this is they paraded NATO weapons for 2 weeks next to Crimea, you guys. And then Zelenskyy said he was going to take it back and did an international conference. That's what caused the invasion. If they would have let Crimea be.
Wow, this is interesting because I'm hearing this from you, and I've never heard this from any of the Ukrainian people at all. When I was there. And
that's the whole point. We were just talking about propaganda. And that's the whole point.
I'm gonna ask a
I
question, and I don't mean this in a condescending
I'm
way.
hearing from so many American people who do not, like, they don't read Russian news, they don't read Ukrainian news, they listen only to certain mainstream media, and that's why they think that this is what
This is what we're hearing. I have to ask Krista, I want to ask you a question. I don't mean this in a condescending way, but I want to ask you, how old are you?
That's
just
not
generally speaking, just general, mid-20s,
sorry,
early 30s. I'm curious.
Question.
I'm sorry.
You can answer the question.
Okay, I'm asking you, what's your general age range?
Yeah, like I said, I'm not willing to answer that question.
Okay, because it seems to me that you're a young person who's really not, is honestly quite naive about what's going on in the world political system, the geopolitical system and situation in the world, in the rest of the world.
So because I brought up that Zelenskyy announced he was going to take back Crimea in an international conference in the summer of 2021, giving rise to this invasion, that somehow means that I'm naive.
That you believe that was
not use this term, Fred. Okay, Krista believes that, so that's fine. I mean,
I understand.
I understand, but that. It's a fact. He
never said that.
Who?
Zelenskyy. Yes.
Are you kidding me? It was announced in the papers all over the we they had an international conference that Crimea was going to be taken back.
I want to see that video.
Well, that's been the position of the United States since 2014. That Crimea belongs to Ukraine.
No, 2021 Operation Seabreeze. Look it up.
Well, I'm saying, but that has been
the U.S. platform. Not know about the Crimea
the U.S.
platform?
policy since 2014, and it has not changed. That Crimea belongs to Ukraine.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
That's the fact. It's the Ukraine. The Crimea has always been part of Ukraine since at least 2014, since at least the invasion of Ukraine into
that was
Crimea.
Russia for 200 years.
For 200 years, where do you get 200 years? For 200 years, no. Ukraine became part of the Soviet Union in 1918 during the Bolshevik Revolution. Exactly. When Stalin took over, that was when Ukraine was incorporated into the Soviet Union. And before that, Kiev was the capital. Before that, Kiev was the capital of the entire Russian Empire.
Exactly. I was just about to tell you. So when we're talking about Russia, Moscow never existed when Kiev was the capital of the empire.
Right.
So when they're talking about Russia, they want everybody to believe that was Russia. But I'm sorry, that was the part of what we right now call Ukraine.
You're saying Crimea was a part of, Crimea was administered. Crimea was a part of Russia. That was their naval base.
No, it was only when it was the Soviet, when Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union.
You need to understand
never part of Russia.
Between the Russia and Soviet Union.
They're not the same.
Existed since after the revolution, okay? And we had 15 republics. Like you have 50 states in the United States. We had 15 republics.
Texas is not part of Washington, D.C. Texas is a state within the union of 50 states.
Exactly. So Ukraine was the republic, Russia was a republic, Kazakhstan was a republic, Moldova was a republic. So at that time, when the republics fell apart in 1991, thank you to Reagan, Crimea was part of the Ukraine, and that's where they signed all the documents. And only in 1994, when we actually allowed the memorandum, when we actually forced Ukraine to unweaponize themselves and give all their nuclear, because most of the nuclear weapons for the entire former Soviet Union was in Ukraine. It wasn't in Russia, matter of fact. My father was the one who built many of those.
Yeah,
so in 1994, we forced the Ukraine to give up all the weapons they had with the assurance in the memorandum that we will stand with as a United States to protect the Ukraine. And guess what we're doing now? We're not doing anything to protect the Ukraine.
Well, I feel like we're doing a lot, but
we're not doing anything, because if you don't listen to the mainstream media and you actually go and read all the bills that was passed in our Congress, you will understand that we're not doing anything. We're just giving them drips. 1.6 here and we're talking about $41 billion. We give the help to Ukraine. Go inside the bill and read it. Out of that $41 billion that they're talking about, only 6 goes to Ukraine. Everything else goes to Ethiopia, to one of the museums, to the Iran, to anybody but Ukraine. And out of that 6, only 1.6 goes to the military. If you do the math, that just to give them few HIMARS, it will be more than 1.6.
I mean,
Zelensky's been asking to cover.
I feel you. I feel really bad for, it's really fucking horrible what everyone's going through and what Ukraine's going through. I just don't think escalation is going to make it better. I think it's going to make
it's not escalation. It's just response to. You're talking about escalating, but the problem is that we're already escalated. Russia has already escalated the situation. They physically invaded Ukraine. And they militarily they're bombing and shelling and destroying Ukraine itself and the infrastructure within Ukraine.
Yeah,
that's what Russia is doing. In the meantime, the U.S. is doing nothing. We're supplying little dribs and drabs here of them for the Ukrainian people to defend themselves with. We don't have any, except for some very brave volunteers that are actually there trying to fight, which they're put in situations that are very, non-combatant situations for the most part, but the Ukrainian people are defending themselves. And we're giving them material, a little bit of material here and there, and giving them some, some funding, and that's about it. For which they cannot buy the weapons that they need, by the way. But it's earmarked for humanitarian use rather than military use that they need to defend themselves. That the Ukrainian people can defend themselves. We're giving them the ability to defend themselves.
And that's the only thing they're asking for. They're not even asking for our military, for our guys to come to their land. They're only asking for the weapons.
Well, we already have planes and
we don't
tanks.
have even
no,
one
they don't.
plane. We don't even have one plane in the Ukraine. When Biden came over there, he was supposed to go to Poland. But then all of a sudden, he decided to go to Ukraine. Do you know why? This was unheard of. We don't have an embassy in Ukraine. We don't have any security. I'm even surprised how his Secret Service allowed him to go to Ukraine. But then I found out that 3 days before, there was a call made to the Kremlin to say that Biden will be in Ukraine. And that day that he was there, there was no bombs. Is that coincidence? I doubt it. It was absolutely unheard of. Guess what? While he was there, he promised that he will give F-16 or F-15s. And then he came back here, he changed his mind. And then Poland said, okay, if you are not giving them F-15s, then we're going to give them MiGs. And then all of a sudden, before they were stopping Poland from giving them anything, now they're saying, okay, so Poland is an independent country. We cannot control what they do. Well, guess what? Ukraine still doesn't have any planes. They cannot cover their sky. That's why people die. That's why infrastructures like Kharkov, the beautiful city of Kharkov that I used to go to like 2-3 times a year, is gone. Mariupol is gone. And many other cities like Bucha, Irpin was beautiful city, like probably 15 kilometers from Kiev, gone. Okay, you cannot define 15% that you're talking about because the entire country is devastated from what's going on there right now.
It was supposed to start with, if you give us Ukraine, everything will be fine and we won't take any more.
And then
we gave them Ukraine. Biden gave him Ukraine. And then
and they will come after Baltic republics. He's not going to stop.
I think that's I don't think that's the case at all.
Well,
The reason why this war happened, the
history.
reason why this war happened is because Minsk II wasn't enacted, and because Zelenskyy decided he was going to take back Crimea, and they would not give them mutuals. And the U.S. was giving so many weapons in strategic weapons during the Trump era.
Okay,
and
2014,
they wanted
in 2014,
mutual security agreements
Russia
that were
took
ignored.
Crimea. In 2014, Russia took Crimea. Biden Obama rather, essentially just gave them Ukraine, gave them Crimea, and said, okay, if you have Ukraine, if you have Crimea, then that's where you're going to stop. Oh yes, that's what we're going to stop. That was the assurance that Putin gave, was that we're going to stop with Crimea. That's all we need is Ukraine, is Crimea. So what happened between 2014 and 2021?
What happened is there was a civil war in the Donbass, and there was agreements.
It's already been proven that it wasn't a civil war in the Donbass. It was a Russian invasion. It was a Russian incursion. It was Russian orchestrated protests and Russian manned offensives that were done in Donbass.
Well, why did they make a law against speaking Russian? And
they never made the law.
I've seen the law. I've read the law. Oh my God, are you serious? It was
I
a $200 fine.
I think it was a law. I think they backed out like almost immediately out of it or something like that. I think it was a big, huge mistake, and then it was never implemented. Because I can tell you, I have relatives who came from Kiev, who live with us, and they speak Russian. That's their language, and that they even said that they didn't have to speak Ukrainian.
Do you know that at one point the bandura was banned? The bandura is a traditional Ukrainian instrument. I have a very good friend, Ina Ishenka. I think many of you probably know her. Sang on The Voice of Ukraine. She sang a beautiful rendition of Pliva Kacha, which is just, it brings tears to my eyes every time I hear it. I mean, everybody in the audience was crying when she played it, but she played the bandura. And the bandura itself, the instrument itself, was a Ukrainian instrument, and it was banned by Russia. And
oh my God, no, I'm not saying that Russia.
I mean,
look at Russian did a Holocaust. I mean, they did massive starvation to Ukrainians, right?
The Holodomor, exactly. I mean, they did a lot of those things.
There's been horrible things. I'm not saying that Russia has not been horrible. Okay, what I'm saying is that we have to act on behalf of our global stability. That's what I'm saying.
And you think things are stable now?
I think global stability means different things for different people, and I think maybe it's the point for the next conversation, because we need to wrap up here. Guys, final points from all of you if we can, because we need to kind of finish this discussion, and we can have another session to talk about what it means to have global stability. Please, can we have a few words around?
Sure. Rina or Krista, ladies first.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I don't really have, I just want to say thank you. And, it's been on my mind a lot, and, happy to follow up and understanding, I'm just, I'm very passionate because I really don't want to see our whole system collapse and, terrorism come and take to our streets. And so I'm very concerned, and that's all I need to say.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for your participation.
Yeah, Rina, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to thank you, Tanchka, for making this possible, and I greatly appreciated your time, guys. And I think we need to make those meetings more open and available to more, I don't know if I'm going to sound as racist right now, but I should say that anyway, to more American people, so we can bring more reality to the people who actually do believe what they read is actually true. Because many people who don't speak the language, who don't understand the culture, they unfortunately, but they don't know what's going on. They think that what what they read is reality. But in reality, I mean, the reality is totally different. But I greatly appreciate, Krista, your opinion. It's good to learn that, you know, for me, it wasn't the news because I hear a lot from my American friends, and somehow I'm just trying to educate one person at a time, explaining to them, showing the history, show the proof, and so on and so forth. But also at the same time, I want to thank Fred for his civil position. I think we need more people like you to understand the reality.
Thank you, Rina. Fred,
Thank you,
final
Rina.
words?
Yes, I want to thank Tatiana and Rina and Krista. I do want to thank you. I do value the dissenting view. I'm in a very difficult and unique position because I have friends, you know, in very, very close friends in Russia. I lived in Russia, and Ukraine is just like a home to me as well. I mean, I have a lot of friends there. I lament the loss of all the places that we used to go and visit. Just the places where, you know, where Dasha and I would go, you know, eat and go dance and go listen to music and things are just gone. The
Oh
places
God.
I visited in Ukraine are gone and destroyed. Just so much loss there in Ukraine, and the people of Russia are suffering because of you know, the hubris of one person, one man. You know, my ex-girlfriend can't get medicine for her daughter, and she can't afford that. So I'm caught in the middle. But I also know that there's a lot of propaganda that's going around and a lot of stuff that's being told that's simply not true. And you know, I've always been an advocate of learning history, because without knowing where we come from, we don't know where we're going. And nothing that's happening now, absolutely nothing that's happening now hasn't been done before already. This is nothing new. We've gone through the same cycles every single time, and we keep thinking that it's unique, that would, you know, that people are just are so you know, they don't know enough history to know that what we're going through is not a unique situation. It's not new. This is something new. This is not something new. This is something that's been happening time after time after time. The technology changes, but the situations are exactly the same. And we really need to be aware of what's happening so that we can make the best use of our time and make the best decisions, because otherwise we're in serious trouble. We're in really serious trouble. And thank you, Tatiana, for hosting this whole thing, because it's a great opportunity for all of us.
Well, thanks all of you for your participation. It was an absolutely greatest discussion I've had in the last year, I think, about Ukraine, because it was so honest and so different views were presented. And I hope maybe if there's an interest, we can meet again and just mention your thoughts and the topics you want to talk about in the future. And I would love to continue if you want that. So thank you again and have a great evening. I hope to see you again talking about Ukraine and other topics.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
God bless.